A at the very top. Okay. Nadar b'cherem. Person makes a nether referring to a cherem. So a cherem can have two meanings. It can mean a fishnet, or it can mean cherem as a one of the languages of nether, something that is forbidden, making something forbidden to you. Put somebody in cherem in modern language means that you're excommunicating them. So the one V'amar, and then so he just says he makes another using the term cherem V'amar, and later he says, you know what? I meant a fishnet. I didn't mean a real nether. Or b'korban. So this is obviously, as we've seen, a standard way to make a nether. Say something is like a korban to me, a sacrifice. V'amar, but then he later says, I didn't mean a sacrifice in the temple. I meant the sacrifice to a king, or a gift, or something like that. I didn't use the word in the standard way. Or hare asmi korban. A person says, I'm making myself a korban. Which, if I said that to you, meaning I'm making myself a korban to you, meaning I'm forswearing giving you any benefit. V'amar, but later he said, Lo nadati ela be'atzem be'ela b'korban shel malachim. Wait a second. V'amar lo nadati ela be'atzem she'inachti lo lios no dibba. When you say atzmi korban, myself, the word etzem literally means bone, right? And another, so it's like two separate meanings. It's a meaning atzmi means myself, or atzmi could mean my bone. And so later he explains, you know what? I was referring to a bone that I put aside for you, and that's not a valid way to make that. Or konam ishti nenesli, or a person uses the term konam, which, as we've seen, is also a valid nether declaration. So he says a konam on my wife getting any benefit from the V'amar, but later he said, well, I was talking about my first wife, my ex-wife, not my current wife. So al kulan, in all these cases, any showing lamb. You don't go to a sage to annul to annul them. In other words, it seems to be saying that they're not valid Nedarim. If he later says that I used this language of a nether, but that's not what I meant. I meant a non-valid language, the non-valid meaning of the words, then it's not really a nether. Initial, but if you do go and ask a question about it, you treat it as a real nether and you go and try and get it annulled. So you punish the person for being too liberal with his mouth, with making Nedarim, and you treat it strictly, which probably means that you find some other way to annul the nether. Like if you knew that this would be the result, you wouldn't have done it. That's what Meir says. Sorry, no, that's what the Chachamim say. I said it wrong. Treating it strictly means that, well, we'll see in the Gemara. Okay, what Rameir says. The rabbis say, what I said before, you find some other way to annul the nether. So we've seen this earlier, that really it's not a nether, but in order to get people to treat Nedarim seriously, we're going to go through the whole, rigmarole of finding some other way to annul the nether. And then so you teach people, not to be too loose with Nedarim. So Gemara says, first of all, Hagufa Kasha. This is self-contradictory, the way the Mishnah is phrased. Amras and Yishalim. First you say you don't have to go to ask a sage. But other Tanya then says initially if you do go to a sage, then we're strict. Does that mean that it really is a nether? If you go to the sage, it makes no sense. Amar Yehuda, this is what it means. They do not need to be asked. They don't need to be permitted. That is with regarding a Talmud Chacham, right? A learned person. But you have an ignorant person, and he doesn't realize that this nether is not valid at all. When he comes to ask a question about it, then you then you treat it like a real neder. So now, what does that mean? You're strict about it. Yishlama machmir. I understand that what you could mean by saying you're strict about it. Lo paschinon le b'charata. That you don't like coach him, right? You don't say, you know what we could do is we could get you out of this nether if you find some way to think, if you convince us that you didn't really understand what you're doing. So that I can understand how you're being strict with it. Like sometimes somebody comes to you with a nether, you try to let them off the hook. Here, you're not going to try to let them off the hook because his language, I guess, is too close to a real nether. What does it mean you punish him, right? Like if it's a real nether and he violates it, he gets punished. If it's not a real nether, there's no punishment. So Kedutanya, this is what the Gemara says, like this brisa. Misha Nazar, a person becomes a Nazir. We have our own Nazirus, and then he violates his Nazirus. He becomes Tameh or he drinks wine. Ain't these cocking low, you don't like get involved. Till he is drinking wine for the same number of days that he didn't drink wine. In other words, that most of his days are being spent violating the Nazirus. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Interesting way to approach it. If he does do that, then you kind of intervene and say, listen, you should really try to figure out a way. Let's figure out a way of your Nazirus in the first place. Rabbi Yossi says, you guys still see me? I'm getting some flashing on the screen. Still with you?
Yeah, I still see you.
Okay, good. But Rabbi Yossi says, when does this apply? But Nazirus Muatas. That's a short Nazirus period, which I think means up to 30 days, because that's like the standard. I will reduce Maruba, but if you have a lengthier Nazirus, I'm going to be a Nazir for 2 months or a year or whatever, then you just have to keep 30 days. In other words, if you're going to be able to keep 30 days of your Nazirus, we don't coach you to look for a way out. So presumably this is what Rameir means when he talks about punishment, that we only that the punishment is making sure that the person keeps his nether, the bogus nether or the invalid nether for the number of days, at least half the time of the intended period. That's the punishment, not that he's punished for breaking the nether, so it comes out that it's not really a nether because he says that he meant the language in a different way. But we compel him to observe at least half the time as if it were a nether. Amar Yosef. Yosef says, "However, Amrei Rabbanan en yiskaking." Well, since we said in this previous brisa that you don't get involved until he's violating more than half of the days of his nether. Beidina dimizdakike lo avi shaper. So a court that becomes involved too early, they're not doing right. Okay, well that seems kind of obvious. So let's see. Okay, so it's the court. Even if he comes to the court should not get involved. Ravacha bar Yaakov Amar Mishamtinan le. That kind of court, we actually we excommunicate that court. Like we don't use that court anymore. If they're getting involved in things that we think they shouldn't be involved in, then that's not good for it, and we should kind of debar them or recall them or whatever. Okay, so we said in the Mishnah, Pesach. And so the rabbi said in the Mishnah that with these Nedarim that they later claim they meant something else, they meant something innocuous, you find another way out, right? So and the reason was so that people would not treat Nedarim lightly. So now we're going to digress to uh, how you should you should be careful not to become a neder person, not to behave improperly and take too many or treating the Nedarim lightly. And we're going to digress to other things that may or may not be improper, as we will see. Tana, we have a brayso. Li'olam al tihi ragil b'nedarim. Don't be too quick to make a neder. Shesofcha limo b'shvuos, because what's going to happen is you're going to take a shvua, the vow that you will you'll end up violating. In other words, don't get into the habit of doing nedarim. You're going to break those, and then you're going to get into the related area of shavuos, which is even more severe. So, and you're going to end up, making trouble for yourself. The alti regulate salam arts. Don't be too friendly, or don't regularly visit ignorant people. Because in the end, the amaretz, the ignorant people, non-learned people are suspected of eating their produce without taking truma and maser. So you get too friendly with somebody like that, you're going to end up eating at this table, and you'll be eating things which you don't know if they are if they're kosher, basically, if they have had truma and maser taken from them. And alti regulates the kohen amaretz, and especially don't visit too much with a kohen who's ignorant, because the kohen can eat truma. So if he's not going to be careful about what food he puts in front of you, and he has truma in his house, you'll end up eating. Don't talk too much with women, because in the end you're going to become, basically you're going to end up sleeping with her. Rabbi Acha says, called Sofa Benashim, a man who looks at women, Sofo Bali Davera. You're going to end up sinning. If you just look at the heel of a woman, you're going to have children that are not well behaved, or not good character children. And as we'll see, this is because of the thought. It probably means, as we will see as we go on, because of the thoughts that you're having while you're having sex with her. If you're thinking of other women or forbidden women to you, then that somehow is a metaphysically bad thing, and your children will turn out not the way you want them. Rav Yosef says we're not talking about other women. We're talking about, don't look at your wife's heel when she's forbidden to you because she's a nida. Amar Shimon ben Lakish. Shimon said, "Akeva de katane b'makim latinofes." The heel doesn't mean heel. It means the makom latinofes, this unclean area, which presumably means the genitals. And why is it called the heel? Shehu mechuvan keneged ha'akev. It's aligned with the heel. Okay, so it's a bit of a strange euphemism, but the idea is, don't be thinking about women's genitals or pink elephants. Tanya, the Brisa says, Moshe says to the people, God brought you to Har Sinai so that and revealed himself to you so that you will fear him. His fear will be on your face, literally. Zuru busha. That means the characteristic of being embarrassed, right? That this is a good thing to be embarrassed. A rabbi in the shul where Sue grew up used to say that guilt is a good thing, because if you're actually guilty of something, maybe you'll repair your ways, right? So we all are accustomed to thinking about, don't feel guilty about something, but if you are guilty, you should feel guilty. So that's busha, that's shame. And the verse continues, God's fear should be on you so that you shall not sin. If you are bashful, if you feel shame, then that will help you to avoid sin. Mikan amru, to fear sin. Mikan amru, From this, they taught, Siman Yafa Ba'adam Shubashan. It's a good thing to be ashamed, to be bashful. Others say, Call Adam Mizbayish Lovim Heru Chote. Person who is same idea, but a person who becomes embarrassed doesn't sin easily. Umisha Ein Lavash is finding the person who doesn't become embarrassed. His ancestors were probably not standing at Har Sinai, because that was, as we've seen, that's kind of an event that is supposed to implant fear in us through all the generations.
There's some of us who have no known Jewish ancestors and therefore would not have had them standing at Har Sinai.
Indeed. Well, not all A are B, right? All A are B, but not all B are A. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan says, the angels told me 4 things. Why are children born, or why are people lame? Because they're presumably their parents turned the table. Turn the table is a euphemism for having sex where the woman is facing away from the man. So again, by being conceived in a way that's somehow improper. And by the way, let me let you know that this view will be rejected in a minute. The views expressed here, they're very Puritan, if that's the right word. And why are people mute? Again, presumably because when they were conceived, their fathers would be kissing the genitals of the mother. Why are people born deaf? Because the parents, again, I'm assuming this means the parents, as we will see that fits best, but you could also interpret this as saying you yourself, if you do any of these things, could become lame or deaf or whatever, but that doesn't seem to fit in, so I'm going to go the other way. So why are people deaf? Because their parents would convert. They would talk with each other during sex. Why are people blind? Because they look at the genitals of the woman during sex. Or minhu. So they asked Shalom is Ima Shalom. They asked Ima Shalom. Ima Shalom was the wife of one of the Tanaim, Rabbi Eliezer. Obviously a learned person who was questions. You have beautiful children. Amrullah, she said, because my husband, Rabbi Eliezer, doesn't speak with me at the beginning of the night or the end of the night, only in the middle of the night. Now, speaking seems, in this context, seems to be a euphemism for sex, right? He doesn't, because we don't have sex at the beginning of the night, excuse me, at the end of the night, but in the middle of the night, that seems to be a good thing. We'll see why. And when he does, he does it in a modest kind of way. He doesn't completely uncover himself. He uncovers a little here, uncovers there. And he makes it seem as if he's being forced to do this, to have sex, not for his own pleasure. And I asked him, Matam, what do you do this for? This seems strange. He answered, so because I don't want to be thinking about another woman. So presumably this means at the beginning of the day, or of the night, or the end of the night, he's already thinking about the previous day or the upcoming day. He might encounter other women, and he doesn't want to be thinking about other women when he's having sex with his wife. And this is in line with what we've just seen before, Rabbi Yochanan. How you behave during conception is effective. And if I were thinking of another woman while sleeping with my wife, that would be like making my children mamzerim, which is of course an extreme statement, but he means in some kind of a moral or metaphysical way or something, not actual mamzerim, clearly. Okay, so in any case, if we take this literally, that he doesn't speak to me at the beginning of the night, if by using the euphemism to speak to as sex, doesn't this imply that speaking during sex is okay? Gemara says, "Lo kasha havamilei detashmish havamilei achranaisa." You can speak about what you're doing. Don't talk about, what happened at the office today while you're asleep, while you're having sex with your wife, okay, or husband. All right. So as I said, these are very kind of puritanical views. Rabbi Yochanan says, yeah, that's fine. That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Davai. That's his view. But the other rabbi said, that's not the way we practice. Any kind of sexual practice you wish to do with your wife, you can do it. Obviously subject to the actual rules of menstruation and so on. It's like meat. If you want to eat it, preserved, then eat it. Soli ochel, if you want to roast it, you can eat it that way. Mavushal, if you want to cook it, you can do it that way. Shaluk ochel, if you want to eat it stewed, you can cook it. Any way you want to eat your meat, as long as the meat is kosher, doesn't matter how you eat it. It's the same with fish, right? Eat fish however, it's the kosher fish. Eat it however you want. Roast it, boil it, poach it, whatever. So the same applies to sexual practices. Amar Meimer, and that is we leave as the way the actual practice. Amar Meimer says, this Rabbi Yochanan ben Avai said the angels told me these 4 things. Who are these angels? Rabbanan, he must mean the rabbis. Because it means real angels. If it came from angels, why do we not practice like that? It's not just a question of what's permitted. He was saying, this is how birth defects are caused. And who would know better than the angels? We certainly don't know better than the angels how birth defects are caused, which is of course very interesting because we know a lot more now about how birth defects are caused than the people we're talking about here in the Gemara. Nonetheless, the idea is that there are mysteries of how defects develop that we just don't have access to. So never mind about what is permitted and not permitted, but if we're talking about what causes birth defects, then the angels would know better. We shouldn't overrule the angels. So it must be he was talking about the rabbis told me this, not the angels. Now, why did he call the rabbis angels? Because they're so distinct from regular people. We're talking about very distinguished rabbis that their whole bearing, they're just a different category of person. A woman came to see Rabbi. She said to him, Rabbi, I set the table for my husband and he turned it over. Again, this is a euphemism, right? I went to have sex with my husband and he did it from behind. He said, BT Torah hitirasach. The Torah allows this. What can I do about it? What do you want me to do about it? Now this whole section is problematic because the way that I read this, and you could read it however you want, but the way that I read this is she's coming to him to complain about it, right? It's I didn't want to do that, is what it seems to be saying, and he says, look, your husband can do with you what he wants to do with you. One could also say that she was surprised, and not that she was not willing, but that she was concerned that it wasn't permitted, right? But then the answer is what do you want me to do about it? Doesn't seem to fit, that seems to be an answer saying listen, you got to do what your husband wants you to do, which is deeply problematic. So I will just leave that up there. We have a similar story. Coming to Rav, another person came to Rav. She said, Rabbi Arachno Shulchan Al-Pacho, same story. He said, why is this different than eating fish? Right? Before, you eat the fish however you want to eat the fish, right?
But
Okay.
this whole section is treating women as objects. Rather than,
Yeah, clearly directed at men, right?
Yeah.
And yes, exactly. Although it's interesting that women are kind of given a voice here. A woman comes to Rebbe, right? It's not, if it were really only directed at men, then the man would come to Rebbe and ask, right? But as I said, it seems to be, in the context of his answer, it seems like she was coming to complain and he didn't take any note of her concerns. But again, you can read it differently if you wish. The Torah quotes what we read in the Shema every day. Don't stray after your hearts. Rabbi said, don't be drinking, again, euphemism, don't be drinking from one cup of wine while don't drink your red wine while you're thinking about white wine. In other words, don't sleep with one woman while you're thinking about another one. Don't let your heart wander. And so Ravina says this should be obvious, but even when it's your own two wives, right? If you have two wives, don't sleep with one while thinking about the other. Okay, the Gemara now quotes from a verse from Yechezkel, Uvarosi mikem hamardim va'aposhim. I will, the whole pasuk is here on the side somewhere. I will choose from you those who rebel against me. Me'eretz Migoreim, Otziasam ve'al Mas Yisrael lo yavo. They won't be rewarded. The rebellers and sinners. Amar Levi, Elu b'nei Tesha midos. Who are these sinners? People who have these 9 children of people who have these 9 characteristics. Again, going back to the idea that how you behave affects your children in their conception. B'nei esnas mashgach is a mnemonic for the following 9 things. B'nei ema b'nei anusa is probably considered one, starting with the aleph. Those children of fear and of people being compelled, women being compelled to have sex. So that results in damaged children. B'nei snua, damaged. Here it's like they're going to be rejected by God because of their origin, which of course is a whole other thing, like which I didn't even mention before, is how come the children suffer for what the parents are doing, it seems like the Gemara is presenting this as just a metaphysical reality, right? That has to do with the discussion of the angels, right? The angels should know better because they know how these things are caused. So anyway, B'nai Snua, children of a woman who is hated, so you sleep with someone that you don't really like. B'nai Nidui, children of someone who is excommunicated, meaning that you sleep with someone that you made a neder not to sleep with. B'nai Tamura, sons of a woman who was exchanged, meaning like if, as we just saw before, if you have let's say you have 2 wives and you think you're sleeping with the one and you're really sleeping with the other, that produces children that have problems. B'nai Mariva, children who are conceived of parents who are arguing with each other, who are battling with each other. B'nai Shichur, so they're drunk. B'nai Grusha Salev, or a man who sleeps with his wife and he's already decided to divorce her, but he hasn't done so yet. B'nai Rebuvia, children who are born from a mix-up or from a mixing. So if a woman sleeps with several men, doesn't know who the father is. That's a mixing of the sperm, so we don't know who the father is. That's a defect in the child. And B'nai Chatsufa, children of a woman who is raised. So it's not clear exactly how is she brazen, but some of them Farshim take this to mean a woman who demands sex, right? Who is forthright about asking for sex. Amy, so Gemara asks about this last thing. Is that not proper? Shmuel says, any man whose wife demands or asks for sex. He's going to have children that are that we didn't even see in the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu, presumably in a good way. Right? He'll have great children. When Moshe takes Yisro's advice and he sets up judges, he says to the people, take men of wisdom and understanding, and then when he actually appointed the judges, he says, "V'akachas rashei shivtechem, anashim chachamim v'yaduim l'shivtechem." He leaves. I took the leaders of all your tribes, but it didn't say use the word wise. He didn't use the adjective wise about them. As he said, I'm going to choose the wise people, the great and wise people. In the end, he only chooses the great people, but doesn't say anything about wise. So in other words, couldn't find any wise people. And then it's written Yisachar Chamar Garem. Yisachar is in Yaakov's blessing to his children. Yisachar is called a strong donkey. And we also see in Divrei Yamim, the tribe of Yisachar is described as wise. They knew how to interpret the times. They were good pundits. So Yisachar is wise, and Yisachar was born. What does it all have to do with anything we're talking about? You remember the story of the mandrakes, where Rachel and Leah are battling over, who's going to have the next child, and they bargain, and basically Rachel sells her position as the wife of the night to Leah. Right. So when Yaakov comes home, the Torah says, Leah says to Yaakov, you're coming to my tent tonight. Right. So that's the ultimate proposition. Right. I mean, she's very, as though the word we used before was brazen about it. Right. So in this case, we see that being forthright about a woman being forthright about demanding sex, as Leah was with Yaakov, produced Yisachar, and Yisachar is the one that is called wise. So the Gemara says, so doesn't that challenge what the previous list, including brazen and the previous list of 9 defect causing things? So Gemara says, Sahid imaratzia artsuye. That's where she's. In the case of Leah, we're going to soften it a little. She wasn't demanding sex. She was just kind of. It's not how it comes across when you read the verse in the Torah, but the Gemara says, think of it as she was kind of implying, or being a little more genteel about it. But what is being criticized is one who is really more demanding. Okay, so that is the end of the parak. And we will pick up here tomorrow.
Thank you, Dov. Have a good day, everyone.
You too.
Yasher Koach. Tomorrow.